Welcome back to the Big Fish Little Fish podcast. Here with my co-host Teo DeBress, episode 22. And you know what, Teo? Not a lot has changed since the last time we were on this podcast. So I think we're ready to just get straight into it. What do you think?
First time in a long time we can say that. I feel like there's always big gaps and a lot happened, but from last week to this week, nothing drastically changed.
No, the only thing that really changed is we've become a little more committed to getting out more content to our 400 subscribers on YouTube and our 7K followers on Instagram and our like 6,600 followers on TikTok.
Not that we're tracking or anything, huh, Miguel?
Not that we're tracking. Hey, also, we just got an X account, aka Twitter, and we made an account. So if you're on YouTube, support us, because not just are we going to have regular content that we normally have, but we may have some, shall I say, interesting comments on society as it comes out, right? The thing about this podcast is we have to wait until the event comes out and record a podcast and chop it up for the public. But now with our Twitter, we may be able to respond immediately.
That's a great point. And honestly, as we were even getting to Twitter, I don't think we really talked about that. That's probably going to be the strongest part of that platform.
Yeah, 100%. And listen, we have very few followers right now. So if you could follow us now, how about this? Our first 10 followers, we will shout you out on the podcast.
How would we know that? Oh, with their username.
On Twitter, yeah.
We'll okay, I like that.
Their Twitter handle, and we'll be like, hey, at whatever, and just be like, shout out to you for being our whatever follower.
Great, I love it. That's an awesome idea.
But make sure that when you come in, you tag us. When you follow us, you tag us on a tweet so we know to shout out to you.
Getting creative.
Yeah.
Now let's get creative on the topics. What do we want to talk about today?
So, Teo and I, in case you haven't been following us for a long time, but in case you have, if you have, you know, Teo and I are both Christians. We're both non-denominationally Christian, which means that we don't have a particular allegiance to any wing or chapter of the Christian
denomination,
but I guess it's Christian diagram, right? Like the Catholics, I don't know. We're not part of any particular group of Christians, but we basically believe in the Bible and take the Bible as truth and believe that Jesus was our Savior, and we believe in the Holy Trinity. I don't know if there's anything you want to add about your belief generally.
No, I think that Christianity is Christianity, and sometimes the denomination thing, I think, creates divides that shouldn't be there with Christianity. So that's why we're non-denominational, because I just see it as one. But other than that, we don't need to get into that today. That's just more of a general thought I have. I've always wondered why we have denominations. Like, I understand it, but to be honest, I think it's silly that Christians subdivide ourselves like that.
Why do you think it's silly?
Because I don't think there's any room for that in the Bible. You know what I mean? Like, we've done that as a product of religion, where religion has created sub-denominations, but nowhere in the Bible does it say, hey, divide yourself amongst different belief systems based on the words I tell you. It says, this is the word of God, and follow it. And I think we should all be working to kind of more mingle our denominations and bring the denominations back to one rather than subdivide. Why does Christianity subdivide itself? You see that minorly in other, I guess, religions, but Christianity, like, I always have seen us as a body of one, the brothers and sisters in Christ. But then we have so many different denominations. It's like, why do we do that? I get it that there's difference of opinions, but we shouldn't make those differences big enough to say that I'm going to separate myself from you as a fellow Christian. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And the differences are very, like, interesting, you know, because it's not like a crazy amount of differences between all the different sections of Christianity. You know, like, some Christian religions let their, church leader get married. Some are like, you have to stay celibate. Some allow for, some, like, they have God, and then they have, like, all the saints, right? Like the Catholics. And I'm not trying to get into, like, necessarily what is right, what is wrong. I'm just saying there are, like, big difference or smaller differences, I feel like, but generally speaking, like, there's God, there's Jesus, there's the Holy Spirit among those, right? I mean, obviously there's, like, the Mormons and Jehovah's Witness. That's a whole nother thing. But I'm just saying, like, we're all supposed to be, you know, children of Christ and have the same goal of going to heaven by believing Jesus is your Savior.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, is that if you follow the Bible, that's the big, like, condition, is that you're following what the Bible says and that you believe what's in the Bible. I don't think there's enough to argue over that makes it so we should start separating ourselves from other Christians to the point where it almost feels like there's, like, I don't want to say like animosity between groups, but there definitely is kind of a division that leads to them not interacting. Like, think about how little one church will interact with another church down the street, and they've separated each other. Like, you're both churches, you're both Christian churches, but you only go to one and you only interact with people of one because of these small differences in the Bible that Christians couldn't get past. So they're like, we'll go to our own church. Like, that seems small. We should be united as a people. Like, as a Christian brotherhood and sisterhood, those divides shouldn't be big enough to say, like, I have my church and you have your church, and then never go to it. We should be, the body of Christ, like a unit of one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. There definitely should be. There should be more, like, and I guess I should probably do more research, but I haven't heard of too many. But there should be more, like, Christian-wide conferences. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
where all the denominations get together, like. But then I guess that also brings in weird things with hierarchy in Christian societies, because you're like, oh, you're having the Pope in them. Are they gonna show up to, like, the big evangelical mega church people thing? Are they all just go together? Are they allowed to be there with the little pastor for the Baptist church down the street? Are they all gonna be on a level round table playing field, talking about the things of Christ?
I think they should.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But, like, would that ever really happen?
Oh, yeah.
They should do it.
They should do it.
It'd be cool.
Wouldn't that be great if the Christian denominations got together to come together as one, as opposed to, like, they had, like, truly, like, a conference? They're just like, hey, let's get together and just share an experience together, because we're all Christian. We're all part of the big same team. Why are we letting our small divisions, like, we're still Christians? Anyway.
I'm sorry, I gotta say this. Wouldn't it be so cool if there was, like, an AAU tournament for, like, the Christian society, and you, like, had teams from every single, like, church, right? Every single, like, church group, and you sent them to, like, a big natural. It's like 10,000 teams compete, and it's like Christian Jeopardy, and they're, like, competing to know everything in the Bible, right? Not off of, like, oh, tradition. They'll be like, how many disciples were there? And they're like, da, da, and you know what I'm saying? You squaring off on that, and then, like, you break it on, you find out, like, which team won. And they'd be like, oh, it was evangelicals this year. Last year, the Orthodox and the Lutheran Church, they've had a chokehold on the game for, like, 6 years in a row. Every year
they've won.
Everybody.
It's the first year. What an upset.
They're competitive,
Yeah. But I don't know. It's
all
interesting.
All proceeds go to charity.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it.
They wouldn't do it. But that wasn't even the point of what we were talking about with Christianity, though. I think we were going to talk about that's a tangent, but its intersection with politics.
Yeah. So, I guess not very often do you go to church and your pastor is talking about political issues, divisive or not divisive, right? And giving their kind of analogies of what the Bible has kind of discussed regarding these issues and how they apply today. They don't do it as much, where they, like, straight up connect them. A lot of times if they do it, it's kind of vague. It's kind of inferred. If you're, like, a teenager or a kid, it might go, like, way over your head. You kind of have to really know what's going on in the world. But I guess Tim and I will talk about, like, the arguments for, the argument against, maybe a little bit of our opinion. But yeah, I mean, like, they just don't really get involved all that much, I mean, even like you see, for example, like the Catholic Church. A lot of times I see that they rarely do kind of weigh in on things, and a lot of times they'll kind of point to verses where Jesus like give to Caesar Caesar's, and I'm botching this, but like give to Caesar's his, and then give to God his, right? I'm not sure if that's a verse. You know what verse I'm talking about? But they kind of take that approach, and that's what I feel like a lot of people they point to when they're discussing Christianity and politics. A lot of Christian churches, they kind of don't want to get involved. They're afraid of losing people. They're afraid of losing that donation. They're not as concerned about like sometimes objective truth when it comes to these issues, because there is gray zones with some of these politics. But at the end of the day, I feel like, in my opinion, sometimes they should get more involved with like being straight up about particular issues, especially if they are black and white. Not every political issue is black and white. Obviously, there's gray issues, but some are straight up black and white.
Yeah. And there's kind of two ways you can look at it. One of them is that way, which is, should political issues and topics creep its way into the church so that they're being discussed in church, or should church be focused more on the word and those types of things? And then the other way is like vice versa. Should Christianity have an influence over what goes on in the political scene? Like, should their voice be something that is, heard and taken into account? And that's where I think there's a lot of like gray in it too, because that's where people start saying, if there is something that's gray, it's about that. Because on one hand, I could see the pros, because it's like, hey, if you have Christianity in your government, ideally it would be influencing the moral framework for the government to be making its decisions. So there is kind of something where you need to have something guiding or being your baseline for your country as to how do you morally feel about things? Like, where are those decisions being made? Is that purely just the people talking, or do you have some point of reference that the people are using as like a cultural norm? And that's really one question. And then the other question is, well, do you have separation of church and state? Because that was the other intention. It's like, you can't be a Christian religion outright, because then there's no separation. They wanted those things separate because they've seen that it can get corrupt. Talk about corruption. They were leaving a corrupt component of that in England, where the church forced them away. Like they felt like they had to go to a new place to get away from the tyranny of that church. You know what I mean? And I think that's because partially the religion and the church were so intertwined in England that they were like, hey, we can't even be religiously free or free because it's so intertwined. So they wanted it there. So it's a tricky thing, because it's like, I do believe that this nation, like that America, needs to have Christian principles guiding it. I don't think we should have outright like a Christian overt government, but I do want Christianity and its principles to be heavily influencing this nation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this nation was founded on a lot of Christian principles. The reason a lot of people came over to the New World was to have the ability to, they wanted the ability to be able to be Protestant. Europe was very Catholic at the time. A lot of people felt like their religious freedoms were not well respected or well received. And they thought that coming over to the New World was their opportunity to be able to be Protestant, or to be able to be a pacifist, or whatever religious sect. My bad. One thing I was going to say on that front is, there aren't that many countries that have started that weren't Christian that allowed a lot of religious freedom. I mean, you look at China, not a lot of religious freedom there. You look at a lot of different parts of the Middle East, not a lot of religious freedom. You look at Europe, kind of added a lot of religious freedom, but I mean, they weren't as free as us when it comes to religious freedom. Some parts of South America has had a lot of religious freedom, but I think that America has probably the widest range of religious freedom. You can go to any state and you'll find mosques, you'll find Christian churches, you'll find Buddhist temples, you'll even find like, I don't even know what they're called, but like satanic churches or whatever. You can find anything in America. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that like free will and like the ability to worship anybody does come from the Bible, even though it's frowned upon to do it. But God allows it. God allows free will. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. And I think one of the things that made America so special is that it was a country founded on Christian principles, where it's one of the few religions that is tolerant of other ones. It's not one of those forced upon you religions. You have to choose if you want to be Christian, but at the same time, it allowed the country to be brought up in Christian principles. And those principles are what set up America to be the greatest nation on earth. And I think what you're actually starting to see, and it's a very interesting correlation, is that as we have stripped out a lot of those Christian principles and Christian components of our country, you start to see that the nation has trended in a different direction. And when you don't have God as your moral framework, you have to rely on something else, and it just becomes the opinion of the people at the time. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of challenges in America, is that without the Christian backbone we had, and without that framework that it gives us, what the country wants and what's good for the country is going to always be changing. It's a moving target because the people are changing. Whereas you need a baseline in Christianity to be able to say, this is what your nation stands for. Now, you're free enough not to do it, but in this nation, we stand for these things. And that's what I thought made America so great. And I think it's what it still does, but we do seem to be losing that in my mind a little bit.
And I think part of the reason we're losing it is because there are a lot of Christian leaders, and I'm talking about pastors, I'm talking about maybe even like deacons and all that. They're afraid to, and I'm not saying political like Republican, Democrat, but I'm talking about issue by issue, stand for what the Christian principles are, because they're worried about losing somebody or appearing to be too political. And a lot of times, like I was mentioning earlier, like people be like, oh, like Jesus didn't hold a political position. You're right. You're not Jesus. And it's good to be Christ-like, but at the same time, think about all the other people that were in the Bible that held political positions or positions that required political influence. Talking about like 5 people at the top is like King David, Moses, Joseph, Joshua, Deborah. You can go down the list. Daniel, literally like people held political influence over people, whether they were being leaders, as in like running a country, or advisors, and giving their thoughts on how things should be done based off of their biblical beliefs, right? And they weren't ashamed to do these things. And you know what? Sometimes it was a hard thing to do. Being Christian isn't actually popular. It's not always necessarily the politically correct thing to do. As a matter of fact, it's not politically correct most of the time. That's why it's okay in America to really make fun of Christians, go after Christians. Being a Christian is considered being square, being a loser sometimes because you're holding on to Christian values. Christian values, low-key, are the hardest to hold. And I'm a sinner. I'm not perfect by any means. Please believe me. That's why I'm not a church leader. But I would say that, I didn't have too many great examples of people, not necessarily that they weren't good people or they weren't good Christians, but like people who were strong in their beliefs to be able to kind of say, hey, X and Y is wrong. And I'll say that in front of anybody. I'll say that in the church. I'll say it in the public. I'll still love people and I'll still try to help convert people. But I'm not afraid to say X or Y. This is the truth. And that's how people in the Bible were. I mean, think about Moses, right? Like Moses was very uncomfortable telling Egypt that, hey, the way you're treating the Jews is wrong. The way you're going about praising, false gods is wrong. And he stood up to them, and he was willing to go against his old family. He did that. He wasn't afraid, and it's just something you just don't see. I can't even think of any like Christian figures today that are taking the world by storm because they're so outright and strong in their beliefs. I've seen a few people, they kind of do it, but they kind of do it in a very soft way. They kind of do it in a, like it's okay. Like the way the men and the women who held these strong leader positions used to go about things in the Bible was very emphatic, very triumphant, they did not at all back down. You don't see much of that today. Even in church, when I go to church, like if they broach these subjects, they're kind of scared to broach it. They're kind of and you see a lot of that in society. Everything's accepted. Everything's okay. Everything is, if you do it, it's cool. If you don't do it, it's fine. Like that's not really how it is.
It's not how I believe it is.
Yeah. Did you want to expand on that?
No, I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's something that it's difficult to even talk about, because I think that almost has now gone beyond just Christians. I feel like Christians have felt that for a bit, where they've felt like, hey, we can't say our opinions on these things or these things. But I think if you really look at it in today's society, you don't even have to be Christian to feel like you can't say everything you want to say anymore, or you're worried about, your opinions. Like, I feel like, I don't know, it just seems like one of those times where your opinions can get you in more trouble than ever before. And I don't know why that is. Where it didn't feel like back in the day, if you shared your opinions, you had as much at risk. Whereas now, if your opinions are publicly, shared, and they're non-popular or not what's the accepted messaging of the time, I feel like you can get in a lot of trouble. It's not good.
Yeah, it's not good.
So Christians are at the forefront, because a lot of the things I think Christians say would be non-conventional thought processes with this world we have today. The way Christianity maps out how the world should be operating and the way the world is operating right now, those are not aligned. I think that we've gone a far, far distance from trying to have the Christian principles that are talked about actually lived in America, at least.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's too bad, because I think America really does need Christianity. If God's not with us as a nation, do we really think we're going to prosper? Is that something we all think in America? Is that we're just a nation that without God behind us, America's going to continue to be great? I think that's super arrogant. If we really think that, that's one of the most arrogant thoughts there is, that America without God would be a successful nation. I think that God blessed America because how America was in its formative, come up of a Christian nation. But to think that if you take God out of America, America's going to continue to succeed and be the strongest, most powerful country in the world, I don't think that happens. I think that ends.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people who are like very involved in the church, very involved in like their faith and in Christian, like the Christian message. Something that I see out of a lot of, I feel like, talented Christians. I want to say talented, I mean talented in like being able to like, bring people to Christ, being able to convey the message in a very good and thoughtful way. Like, I don't want to say wasted, but it's like a lot of them just want to go on missions trips, right? They just want to go all over the world, and they're just constantly traveling. But here at home, we have so many people that are not saved, and they're not like people they know in their everyday lives. They're never like, hey, like, do you know Jesus? Are you saved? Can I help you? And conveying the message here, right? It's easier to convey the message to somebody who kind of is hungry and there wasn't anything you say because you have a pizza, right? But is it easy to like tell the coworker at work, or like if you're somebody with major influence in your community, not in a Christian way, but just maybe you're maybe you're an organizer in your community, or maybe you're somebody who's an investor and you have a lot of influence. Like, do you ever, talk about your faith and try to convert people, even though you like may or may not like be able to convey it in other places where you don't know the people as well? I think a lot of times people miss the closest around us who don't know God at all. And it's just like I see this because I went to Liberty University, right? To Liberty University, and there are a lot of people who were in majors that had to do with like being a pastor or like some type of something where it's like there was a big focus on Christianity. And all these people, when I talked to them, I was like, man, you guys really know a lot about the Bible. You guys like make me want to have a fire for Christ. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, like, what are you doing this year? Or what do you do when you graduate? And they're like, oh, I'm going to go to like some other country for like years on end and then like, work on converting people over there. And I'm like, that's great and that's cool. But it seems like that's a lot of what we're doing. Like, if we don't start converting people over here, we're going to lose this. Mm-hmm. We're going to lose the United States. If you lose the United States, there's not going to be too many mission trips going on. after this, if you lose what's going on here at home, that's the thing. Like a lot of these pastors in Christian institutions, like I'm talking about like Liberty University, Pensacola Christian College, Bob Jones. What are the ones like? There's like the Texas Christian University. Like they're building a lot of warriors for Christ, but the warriors for Christ, they're not really fighting the battle here at home the way I think it should be fought. Like right now, we need warriors for Christ in business. We need warriors for Christ in politics. We need warriors for Christ in any section of America to be able to get more people to come into Christianity so we can maintain America. Because that's the thing, I think part of the reason America's falling apart is like America doesn't have the same moral standards it used to have. Like we don't have moral standards. We've become a lot more secular, and it used to, like, I feel like they've brainwashed our generation and maybe even generations coming behind us and even some of the ones ahead of us. But it's like they were like, everything has to be more secular. Everything's to be better if everything's more secular, right? They took Christianity out of schools, and a lot of people were like, yeah, like it's better that way. But I mean, the principles that were in the schools were the same principles that built this country. Don't murder, don't steal, like very basic rudimentary things that are good for society as a whole, right? And we're not guarding these things. There are people who want to take "In God We Trust" like out of important documents. There are people who want to take down anything that even makes Christianity even noticeable out. So funny enough, I started writing this to be like president, but then I thought world leader.
Okay,
Anybody
so
who's running
like that.
5 characteristics any world leader should have, or any president should have. So I'll start with my first one. The first characteristic is an unquenchable work ethic. So an unquenchable work ethic and devotion to their craft or their job. And specifically, like, let's just say we can take president, for example. Whoever is running the presidency should look at this job as if they have nothing else in life. And that may sound a little crazy, right? Some people will be like, hey, it's just a job. No, this is not just a job. You're in charge. Let's say it's the United States. You're in charge of the free world. You're in charge. Like people talk a lot of bullshit. They're like some crazy people are like, America is a terrible country. It should fall apart. Yada, yada, yada. Dude, fuck that. If America fell apart, the world would fall apart. Half of the reason, like, the world isn't in chaos, and I will definitely admit, America does get involved in some terrible conflicts for no reason sometimes, or bad reasons. It could be worse if we weren't here to be a presence, right? So that being said, whoever's running this job, it should be the number one priority. They should live, breathe, and shit this job. Everything about this job should be their number one priority. They shouldn't really be thinking about much else, right? I understand people burn out, but whoever has this job should have an undeniable, freakish amount of energy. So one thing that I thought about when I was thinking about this characteristic, I put a list together of some people with some crazy uncommon work ethics. So Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Henry Ford, The Rock, Thomas Edison. These are people completely different walks of life. Every single one of these people had a crazy work ethic. Not necessarily the best at what they did, but had they were known for their work ethic. And that's, whoever's running for the president, that's what people should talk about. Like when somebody's running for president, the reputation that precedes them is like, this person's work ethic is insane. I never knew somebody who worked like that. That's who you want running that's who you want running the country. Somebody with a crazy work ethic, and like people who knew them growing up were like, I knew this guy was going to be a president, or I knew this one was going to be a president. This person was nuts in high school. This person was nuts in college. This person was nuts in law school. This person was nuts in business or whatever job. Whatever they were doing, I don't want to hear they were nuts as a senator and got nothing passed. That doesn't make me feel comfortable. We've had a lot of lifelong politicians being presidents who have steered us to the left or to the right, regardless of who it is that's running president, whether they were an attorney or an entrepreneur or something else that we haven't seen yet, right? And maybe if it is a politician, let it be a politician who's actually getting things done. And they weren't a politician that people were like, this guy doesn't really care. They have a reputation of that. Because there are plenty of politicians that people are like, does this person really work hard? Does this person have a pristine reputation of work ethic? Not necessarily. So, an unquenchable work ethic and devotion to the job. 2, a high level of self-control regardless of the high-pressure situation. So, when I say this, when you are the president or the world leader or a world leader for your country, literally all day you're putting out fires. You are basically a fireman for a country. You're just putting out fires all day. You're dealing with natural disasters. You're dealing with foreign economic crisis or foreign wars that are that involve either your immediate attention or potential support. And you have to think about, should I or should I not actually support whatever it is, the conflict? You're going to be dealing with economic turmoil, economic crisis. You're going to be dealing with you're going to be dealing with the most difficult situations that comes with running a country, and none of them are just going to be chill. I don't think a president or a world leader will ever have a chill day, a day where nothing really happens. Something is always going to happen, and you're always going to have to deal with these high pressure moments. So you have to have a sense of calm about you and a ability to make the hard decision regardless of how emotional you may feel about it or the people you represent feel about it. But looking at how the long-term effects of your decisions are going to impact the country. Okay, 3. So a self-awareness of identifying what they don't understand and what people they can talk to help them understand a subject. Now, that is a lot of words, so let me break this down. So, and I think it's more than ever actually something that's happening within the last 20 years. For example, technology. Most of the people who are presidents so far have not been high-tech CEOs or entrepreneurs who really understand coding or AI at a high level, right? So if you're a world leader or president, you're going to have to not just understand these things, because you won't understand them at first, most likely. You're going to have to know whose shoulder to tap to explain these things and give you pros and cons of potential risks in the future. A lot of people, for example, is a hot topic, AI. A lot of people are concerned about AI. There's a lot of discussion on, should we let AI just keep growing? Is it a potential long-term threat to society, whether an economic threat or literally a threat where it turns into an organism that starts killing human beings? The president needs to understand these risks. Elon Musk has come out before and talked about how it is and was at different points his biggest concern about society, and he's tried to speak to Obama and Trump about the detriments of it. So whoever's running the country needs to understand these type of threats and figure out who is a good resource to not just understand it, but be able to govern among these issues, as well as how to approach them. Because the president isn't going to know everything. So if the president's not going to know everything, he's going to need to know who to lean on for guidance and wisdom, and who's not trying to manipulate him. Because, and we'll get into later, corporations, if you're just straight up listening to corporations, if you put the president, you're just listening to corporations' opinion on facts, you may not always get a well-rounded answer on the questions that you have. Here's a good one. So a world leader, number 4, world leader should have a consistent track record of high moral principle. Now, when I say that, I don't just say, oh, they need to have a high moral principle, period. No, a consistent track record. And when I say that, what I mean is, let's just say someone is Christian, right? They're a Christian. So if they go by Christian values, their values 20 years ago their values and beliefs and principles should be relatively the same. They may change a little bit, right? Especially in some gray areas, but for the most part, they should have certain things down packed where there's no wiggle room. If you see somebody from the age of 30 to 50 having giant swings in what they believe morally and principally, this person is somebody who's just going to blow with the wind. Their opinion's going to change as time changes. Principles and morals are based off of a lot of absolute truths, and absolute truths don't change regardless of how society feels about something. So somebody who has drastically different morals and principles every 5 years is not a good candidate for president or a world leader. And then number 5, this one may be a shocker to some, but in my opinion, it should be literally, this could be arguably number 1, but number 5 is prioritize the needs of your own citizens or the people you represent. And when I say that, not many countries all around the world are prioritizing other countries over the needs of their own citizens. For example, this is a trending topic right now. There's a hurricane right now where people are in need of financial assistance, and we have had so much quote unquote trouble getting funds over to these people in America who are impacted by this hurricane and giving them assistance, but somehow we have given billions on billions of dollars to all, not just wars, but all types of countries all over the world that aren't our citizens. Somehow that money is still being pumped out of America. We're giving countries all over the world assistance, whether it's military or economic, whatever it is. But we have people here at home who are struggling. And this is hurricanes, but think about the Hawaii wildfires, California wildfires. I mean, you can go on the list when there are natural disasters in the United States, and we always say, oh my gosh, it's a tragedy. Why aren't things being fixed? Like, why aren't things being fixed? Why isn't that a bigger deal? So, number 5, prioritize the needs of the citizens that you are governing. That's my 5.
No, that was a good list. And you know what's crazy is I don't think I had any of those 5 on my list. And even though my top 5 is still different, I love your top 5. And that's the point, is there's plenty of good skills that our next president can have. So even though it's different, here are my top 5 skills our next president should have. Starting out number 1, top of the list is they need to be a master at negotiation as well as diplomacy. The role of the president of the United States is to be the figurehead of the country. They need to be able to interact with people both domestically, whether it's our politicians or our government, domestically, whether our citizens, and internationally, where we're dealing with both our enemies as well as our allies. You're dealing with every single part of every group, domestically and foreign. So you need to have a level of diplomacy so that you're building relationships. I think that whenever we're looking around the world, we should be saying, is our president putting us in positions where more countries are looking at us as someone that they want as their ally? Are they looking at us as someone saying, this is someone we want to be in collaboration with in America? We don't want enemies. Dealing with enemies to America makes America's job harder. And I think that sometimes we forget that the president should be dealing with that situation that's handed to them. But when they take that first step into office, their priority should be taking care of Americans first and foremost, and then looking externally and saying, what nations can we build relationships? Our allies should be stronger allies. And our enemies, we should be finding ways to de-escalate so that we're not enemies forever. We don't have to be enemies with anyone. Sure, America has enemies, but good diplomacy. And then once you have good diplomacy, you got to be able to negotiate. The president is negotiating on America's behalf every time they speak to a foreign country. As well as domestically, they're the one that is signing off on congressional bills. So they need to be intertwined with the congressional process and building relationships and then negotiating really well so that it's giving Americans all of the terms that we need and building relationships as well as getting great economic as well as military deals with foreign nations. So that's why we need a president that has both diplomacy as well as is the best negotiator we have to put up in those situations. The second skill our president needs is an understanding of the everyday American. I think We've had so many presidents over the years. I would be very interested to know how many presidents we've had that have either come from Harvard or Yale or one of these Ivy League schools. And I think the problem is sometimes these people, yeah, we want our best and brightest, but they got to be able to understand now more than ever what the everyday American's going through. Because when they go into those rooms and they're negotiating with whether it's Congress or whether they're negotiating with foreign countries, they got to be able to remember why they're doing what they're doing, and is to represent and make the lives better of our everyday Americans. And we need a president that can understand the struggles that Americans are going through, understand the worries and the priorities and what Americans are focused on, and use their position to make Americans' life better. That is the role of the president. Are they working tirelessly to make sure that our Americans are better off than when they step foot into the office? Because that's what they all run on. Every president runs on the fact that they're going to make your life better. Well, let's use a track record to say, is Americans' life better at the end of the presidency? And I'm not making any excuses or blaming this or blaming that. You came in, you ran on a political campaign, you were going to do these things. Let's hold people accountable to what they said they were going to do and the results of those things. So the second thing is they have to understand everyday Americans. The third skill a president needs is to have a knowledge and almost understanding of military and military tactics. I think we all feel it. We're on the brink of what feels like World War III. The world is in chaos, and America is in charge of the single biggest and most powerful military in the world. I don't know why we don't talk about this more, where our president is going to either be put into situations where we're going to have to use our military, or should be putting the military strategically in positions, ideally so that we don't have to use our military. Well, you need someone that understands military tactics and strategy. Why aren't we scrutinizing our presidential candidates to say, how are you going to act in military-related situations? Because the chances are that America's going to be involved in something, and how we conduct ourselves in that event directly impacts you, me, and everyone around us. No one wants to send their sons to war. No one wants to send their families into situations where they have loved ones going across the world to fight wars. We need a president that's going to prevent wars when they're not mandatory and execute in the best strategic fashion when American military strength is needed. We don't use that sparingly, and we should be really, really evaluating, and the president should have the best skills to be able to do those things. So the third thing that they need is skills in military. The fourth skill a president needs is great financial management. I don't understand where we're all looking around and pretending like we don't have this giant problem, which is a growing deficit, where we are at $35 trillion at the time of this recording, and pretending like this isn't putting America at the risk of financial ruin. We need a president that not only understands the economy, but is putting forward an economic plan that is going to cut down on the deficit, increase productivity and labor in the American workforce, and increase the growth of our national economy. We need a growing economy that has, if in an ideal world, a budget surplus. You know, there once upon a time, America did have budget surpluses. We don't have to run on trillions on trillions on trillions of dollars of deficit every year. A president that came in and had great financial prowess and could get Congress to actually do what a lot of them say they're going to do could completely turn around the economy. And last, and probably honestly most importantly, we need a president that has a strategic vision as well as the ability for inspiration. America's at a crossroads right now where we need to make a decision on where the country's going. And it seems like there's only two schools of thoughts. You either have to fully adapt everything that was America and what it was in its past, or you have to completely reject everything in America's past. And looking forward, some people that want to reject America say we have to have a completely new future for the country. And then the people who want to only adapt it say, hey, we shouldn't change at all. We need to be a nation that's going to stay exactly how we were. America needs a president that can take the best of what made America America in our past, and anything that was wrong that America didn't do right, we completely and utterly reject that. And we take all of those things that made America great, and we carry them as the foundation of America, and then we look forward. And that president should be able to see where our future America is, a better, brighter America for our future, still with our old principles that made us great, and find ways to make us greater. And then, more importantly, we need a president that not only can see that, but that can inspire Americans to work towards that. We got to stop dividing the country. We have to stop using these divisive tactics that are saying it's this or that. We can come together as an American people with the right president and have that president sell the vision of where America can go and get us all working as a unified United States of America towards that vision. Because what we're currently doing right now doesn't seem to have that. It's divisive and it's splitting America apart. And I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. If we had a president that had that beautiful vision for America and could inspire us all to work towards that, that's a powerful America that would be something that makes the world look at us in a different light. And it's possible, but we need a president that has that skill too. So those are my top 5. I think that completely different than your top 5, but it's what we got together. So
yeah. And also, we're doing this for you guys. We're cutting it a little bit shorter. We talk a lot in these episodes, so this will be a shorter one, a little bit of a shorter one, and that way we have firepower going into episode 23. And please, if you like the show, let us know. Comment. Give us a like. We want to know. What's your feedback?
What topics should we talk about next?
Are you Christian? Do you like us talking about Christianity? Do you like us to just keep it about politics? Do you like our lists? Do you like our fantasy drafts? What do you like? Comment. Let us know. And is that all we have today, brother?
I think that's all I got.
Shout out to Pope.